There are three main areas that I think are going to be of greatest concern for the technology sector in 2024. Those are artificial intelligence, the increased focus by regulators and legislators on content regulation or online safety generally, and then also the macro funding environment. So let's take each one in turn. If we look at AI, as of this recording, there's still a large amount of debate around whether or not the AI Act is going to be adopted by the European Union. But if it is adopted, it's going to profoundly regulate how certain types of artificial intelligence, particularly generative AIs and high risk artificial intelligence, will be regulated in Europe. Effectively, we're going to move into a space where AI is going to be regulated more like a physical product with conformity assessments and the like, rather than software. Even if we don't see the AI Act come into force, I still think AI is going to be a very hot topic for both regulators and business. On the commercial side, we see businesses really pushing to take advantage of the benefits of this technology. And on the regulatory side, we see a lot of interest, particularly on the data protection side, around how AI works, how the models are trained, whether the results that are provided are accurate, etc. So this is going to be a very big focus of regulatory attention. I think a lot of attention for technology lawyers over the course of next year. The second big area is what you could broadly call online safety or content regulation. This development makes most sense in a historic context. Historically, the approach that was somewhat taken was that online platforms were largely not responsible for the content that was on their services. I mean, there are certain notice and takedown requirements that have been enforced for years, but generally speaking, they were seen as intermediaries, almost akin to the phone network. There's been a real legislative push over the last couple of years with legislation in Ireland, the EU, and the UK, things like the Digital Services Act, which is really focused on requiring that companies do more to remove online content. And some of these rules are quite detailed and quite prescriptive. And for larger companies, require things like detailed risk assessments. So we're moving into this idea where online safety is now going to be a really big legal theme and a big legal topic. And I expect that to continue to be a big development over the course of next year. The final area, which is more of a macroeconomic one rather than a legal one, but it impacts on legal practice, is the whole issue of funding. Because for many years we were in a low interest rate environment, and that meant that there was quite a lot of money within the venture capital community. Interest rates have gone up, which both depresses valuations for companies that are pre-profit, and it also means that less money might be flowing into venture capital. This means that the funding environment is likely going to get a bit tougher for companies. What I hear is companies are still getting funded, but it is tougher and there's less money going around the system. This from a legal perspective, this obviously will impact on funding terms. And for companies that are perhaps not raising funding and coming to the end of their life, it also means that directors need to consider things like how to properly wind the company down in a respectful and a lawful manner. So those are what I think are going to be the big three messages of the next year. Funding issues, online safety, and artificial intelligence. In short, I think there's going to be a lot of work to do for lawyers and businesses in this space. In terms of areas of legal risk in 2024 on the technology side, I think the big one is the handling of children's data. This is a very hot topic for regulators at the moment. We're seeing a lot of enforcement action, we're seeing a lot of regulatory focus and concern, and we've seen a lot of quite strict guidance documentation issued. It's also an area where there's a degree of political pressure on regulators to act in certain states. So what I would suggest, if a company is providing technology or content that is available or accessible or generally used by persons under the age of 18, I think they need to look at how they handle under 18 data. It's not uncommon for organizations to treat teenager data in the same way as they treat adult data, and this throws up various legal risks. The basic requirement you will see from the Irish Data Protection Commission is you either have to age gate your service and properly enforce that, such that you are treating, if you have kids' data, you're treating it appropriately, or alternatively, you have to deploy what's called a floor of protection, which means that if you don't know what age the people on your service are, but you've grounds to believe they include teenagers and minors, you have to ensure that the service generally is safe for children. So that, to my mind, is probably the biggest area of risk, and what I think companies should focus on. It's really a case of making sure that if their service is used by kids, that the service is is deployed in a child-friendly way. And in practical terms, that means things like, looking at your legal documentation, like your privacy policy, and making sure that the points in there are expressed in a way that's understandable to children. And it can also mean things like looking at things like your default online settings around how data is made accessible, whether it's used for advertising, etc. So, child protection, I think, is going to be the big area of focus, and probably an area where companies can take steps to drive down their legal risk in 2024.